Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome to another top 10 list. I thought I would bang this one out first thing Monday morning, even though it's not Monday morning for me. I kind of been wanting to do this one for a while, but I held off. I almost wanted to do this one more than the heroes because, well, obvious reasons, but a great hero can only be as good as the challenges he has to overcome, and this list of villains proves that and more. It's the list of my favorite villains that I love to hate, but not really, because I don't hate that I love them, and I don't love to hate them. In a lot of ways, these are the best of the best, the cream of the crop, the villains that all other villains strive to be like, those villains that know they're villains anyways. Some of them may surprise you, some of them you may not be familiar with, but for the most part, I think you've probably heard of all of them. And I'm going to start the list with not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 honorable mentions, because you cannot have one without all 5. The Apostle of War by the name of Algaroth, the Mistress of the Dark Cemetery, Ilian, the Apostle of Insanity, Muiji. We called him Muiji just because it sounds funnier, even though he is nothing to laugh at. Or maybe if you're crazy enough, you do. I don't know. The Lord of Lies and Betrayal, the Apostle Samai, and my least favorite, of course, the Apostle of Pestilence, Demnagonus, and these are all the apostles from Warzone, Mutant Chronicles, Doom Trooper. If you know, you know. If you don't, one more reason why Mutant Chronicles was, in my opinion, a lot more interesting than 40K. It was darker, if you can believe that. More cynical, more believable, and less a big freaking joke, because if you go back far enough, you will realize that a huge part of 40K was trying to be humorous. And don't get me wrong, I love a lot of things about it, but if I had to choose, it would be Warzone, Mutant Chronicles, Doom Trooper over 40K every day of the week. And the Apostles, the Sub-Masters of the Dark Legion, obviously very similar to the Lords of Chaos, without the goofiness, far more terrifying, at least in my opinion. So they get the honorable mention at the honorable mention spot. Next is a character that was just dripping with evil and despicable behaviors, and most people, even though they may be familiar and fans of the franchise, don't know or remember Colonel Thomas Riley Edwards, the absolute top cream of the crop when it came to villainy, I should say, in the Robotech franchise. And he only appeared in the later books, maybe in some of the comic books. I stopped buying them a long time ago. But in the last, I believe it was the Sentinels, or after the Sentinels, or around that time, he was the human that betrayed. He was kind of like the Baltar from Battlestar Galactica, and Baltar sadly did not make the list because he was such a weasel. All of the villains on my list are not comical. They're not jokes. The Joker will not make this list because I honestly can't stand that character. All of them are competent, brilliant, dangerous, deadly, malicious, vile, despicable, but above all things competent, and not even always super powerful. Darkseid and Apocalypse didn't make the list. Some of those kinds of characters, because they're just so two-dimensional. These ones are absolute phenomenal characters with reputations that precede them, and as you'll see going through the list, there are a few that may not quite fit the bill, but they top out other categories. Like Eric of Amber, which is my number 9. He was just so much fun to hate. You were born to hate this character, and then when you hated him as much as you could, you suddenly doubted every minute of your hatred for him. Maybe he wasn't the bad guy that we all thought he was. And for that alone, that feeling of like, oh my God, was I wrong? Was he really the good guy? It gets him into this list. Plus, there's a couple other villains from Amber, but Eric was you just felt the hatred that felt like your hatred, like you had every right to hate Eric. As the reader, as reading through Corwin's eyes, he was such a great character. Bringing up the number 8 spot is Ming the Merciless. If like most of my friends out there, we love Max von Sydow's portrayal of Ming the Merciless, but that inspiration came from somewhere. It came from the comic strips and the radio shows and the old black and white movie serials. He was just an absolute top-notch villain. One of the ultimate mustache twirling villains of all time. It was just so over the top, almost comical. Sometimes you could laugh at him, but at the same time you just knew that he was capable of anything. So he makes my number 8. One of the few comic book villains that make this list. This one struck fear in me as a child. When I started reading the Teen Titans at, I think I was 10 years old, this character made me worry that Robin and his friends were in the deepest of danger from a man, just kind of like, I'm not going to say a normal man, but a man, not a robot, not a monster, not an alien, although he was absolutely a monster. Deathstroke the Terminator was just absolutely one of the worst of the worst. And like I said, dangerous, competent, scary, untrustworthy, and always up to more than you could possibly figure out until it was too late. The next one, another DC, I believe it's DC, I'm pretty sure it's DC. One of my favorite villains, a little bit less now that I've got the director's cut of the movie and learned a few details that maybe make me like him less, but up until that point, this was one of the most competent villains, one of the biggest shocks and surprises when you first learned that Ozymandias is in fact the villain of the story. He is the absolute worst of the worst in the story that is The Watchmen. Now, I haven't read the Before the Watchmen. I haven't watched the TV show. I'm just going by the original graphic novel that I have in the comic books, and of course the movie, because I think I forget the actor who portrayed him as absolutely believably almost perfect, except that stupid flaw that made him decide to do what he did, and maybe a couple of other things. He out-thunk everybody, out-fought everybody, out-manipulated the entire world and tricked them into the ultimate practical joke. But of course, there's going to be people out there that they're going to bring up a couple of little things, including the fact that he probably got caught, but the book doesn't end that way. It may be later. It ends on the lady or the tiger. Does he get caught or doesn't he? And depending on how you view the world, or at least that world, will determine your answer, and no answer is ultimately correct. And that's the way that story should have ended and should have been played out, so that it's not everything is required to be known and codified and penciled out so that everybody knows the answer, because Both answers are equally terrifying. Next, ever since I was a little kid, when I met David Prowse in person, in the suit, in the field, while playing football. I was on a Pee Wee football team, and I found out that he was going to be at the football team, at the football field for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe there was something nearby but David Prowse showed up in the full Darth Vader costume, and even as a kid, before I met him, he was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. Darth Vader, up until halfway through Return of the Jedi, was one of the scariest bad guys of all time. So mysterious, so powerful, so dangerous, and so evil, or so it seemed, that he makes number 5 on my list. Obviously, things changed with other movies and other people trying to deconstruct the character, but if you take him through the first movie, the second movie, and a good chunk of the third movie, that being the Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader was just terrifying. Just absolutely terrifying. Speaking of terrifying, one of the oldest, most terrifying villains of all time, one of the scariest concepts that ushered in so many copycats, clones, wannabes, other hopeful vampires. Dracula comes in at number 4 as one of the all-time greatest villains. Very few things made us all shiver in the night, worry about our precious drops of blood. Yeah, Dracula absolutely spawned so many other great villains and stories and ideas and movies that he absolutely has to be on this list. And while Dracula was scary, the next one made you think, made you burn the midnight oil, made you think of every possibility, every chess move. And even then, he was running circles around everyone except Sherlock Holmes, and that is, of course, my number 3, Professor Moriarty. Just the one of the, obviously there's a couple more on my list, but very few villains embodied the absolute level of challenge that he did, and for that reason and others, he deserves, at least in my opinion, number 3 on my list of top 10 villains that I really love to hate and don't hate that I love. Next, one of my favorite characters of all time, because he's both a good guy and a bad guy, depending on how you look at it. More bad guy than good guy, I think, but just had it all going for him. But that one thing, that flaw that made him still human, but still a monster, still a power, a force to be reckoned with. A one-man army that could best the best until the last minute when he was written to fail so that the good guys could win. None other than Doctor Doom, one of my all-time favorites. Absolutely my favorite, probably, Marvel character. He could do it all. There was nothing he couldn't do except ultimately win, except for those few occasions where he won for a little while, and then, you can't have him, always winning. Even in his own comic book, Doom 2099, that had to come to a screeching halt. I don't remember how that ended because I didn't read the very last couple of issues, but I will, rest assured. Now, number 1, you guys are probably thinking and scratching, who could it be? Is it Sauron? No, it's not Sauron. Super powerful, super evil, super boring in my opinion, because there just wasn't enough details about him, at least in the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Maybe there's more in the Silmarillion, but I never read that. I tried, I couldn't get through it. Maybe you're thinking Thothamon or Thulsa Doom. Those guys are just meatheads as far as I'm concerned. Very, very little in the way of strategy. and all destined to fail miserably because the other meathead had to win, and that's either Cole or Conan. I love both those characters, but those stories are so obviously filled with plot armor, whereas the number one on my list failed, was betrayed, was stabbed in the back, was thrown in jail and beat up and shot and stabbed, and everything else horrible that could happen to you, even losing his daughter before his eyes. Just absolutely all the worst things that you could possibly imagine happened to him. But yet, when the time came, he came and went on his own terms. The classiest of supervillains of all time, the concierge of crime, none other than Raymond Reddington. Just absolutely, just taught the masterclass on how to be a supervillain, how to be how to be villainous, how to have honor, how to be noble and evil all at the same time. If you're not familiar with the character, he was the star of The Blacklist, and from the first episode, I was just like, who is this guy? And you know what? I still don't know. Most of us don't, and that's what makes his story so absolutely magnificent. Not all the things he did, because you never knew, was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? Was he, in the middle? No, he was a bad guy. He's definitely a bad guy. He did some really bad things. His temper was short, but a slow burn. But when he went off, people were going to be lying in a pool of their own blood or worse. Raymond Reddington is, in my opinion, the absolute greatest villain of all time, and he had no superpowers other than his intellect and his vast wealth that he accumulated over the course of his lifetime through his own intellect. He didn't inherit it. He didn't start out rich. He didn't inherit it from his family after they were murdered by some criminal in a back alley. He earned every bit of it. He clawed his way to the top of everything. And like I said, when his time was over, he went out like a man, faced his demons and his executioner with the absolute apogee of class. He will be missed. I will watch it again, but not for a good long time. 12 seasons of the Blacklist is quite a bit. And yeah, if you haven't watched it, the only thing I would recommend Netflix for, I hope someday they'll put it on DVD and then I'll have it and I can skip that one COVID season because it was absolutely awful. But everything else about it was a phenomenal show. That's what I've got for you guys this morning. I cannot wait to hear your lists and hear the shrieks and the cries of anger at my defamation of some of the people on who didn't make this list. But that's what this is all about, is stating our opinions and sharing with you guys how we feel about these top tens and how those things make us who we are. So hurry up, make your lists. I can't wait to see them, and I will see you guys in the funny papers.